Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. We talked all about how important sperm health is in episode 6, so if you missed it, go back and start there. Today, we're diving into more details on sperm DNA fragmentation. Sperm contributes to 50% of your future tiny human's DNA. And if it is broken or abnormal, it negatively impacts conception success and pregnancy outcomes. Here are some stats. So, more damage to sperm DNA is associated with increased miscarriage risk, decreased quality of embryos in IVF, a 50% decrease in conception, and an increase in childhood disease, including cancer. Partners of women who miscarry tend to have double the amount of DNA fragmentation when compared to couples who have not gone through a miscarriage. This is true in IUI and IVF also. Higher levels of DNA fragmentation also lead to implantation issues and overall lower pregnancy rates in IUI and IVF as well. This data shows that sperm with DNA damage can fertilize an egg, but they lead to poorer pregnancy outcomes if implantation is successful. Okay, so yes, even if all other sperm parameters are optimal, we have a good count, motility is looking good, the shape of the sperm is all looking good. If you're struggling to conceive, get DNA fragmentation tested as well. DNA fragmentation can be present even if all sperm parameters are within optimal ranges, okay? Most providers don't realize this and kind of write it off. This means that even when there's a high count, a significant amount of DNA damage can still be present and still increase time to conception, increase risk of miscarriage, and health of the pregnancy and the health of the child if carried to term. So there are more negative impacts if DNA fragmentation is present, even if all other parameters are normal. I know I've said that a few times, but I really want you to understand that it is an important piece to look at if you're still struggling to conceive or carry to term. There is a normal process in metabolism that creates what we know as free radicals, and free radicals also result from external sources like air pollution, chemical exposure, smoking, or any other toxins. If our exposure to free radicals is high, they can lead to oxidation, which damages egg and sperm health, resulting in some DNA fragmentation. This oxidative damage or oxidative stress damages the energy source in our cells known as a mitochondria. When that mitochondria is damaged, it starts releasing even more oxidation, causing even more damage. Sperm can have DNA fragmentation even when a standard sperm analysis is normal, okay? I know you've heard it at this point, but it's a really important point. And I hope it encourages you to advocate for getting this marker looked at. Additional reasons to request testing for DNA fragmentation include that you just want to rule out any concerns during the preconception period. So you can do it proactively too. There's nothing wrong with that. Knowing in advance before you run into complications can be a really helpful way to decrease the risk of those complications. If you've been trying to conceive for 6 months or more, getting that DNA fragmentation looked at can be helpful. If you have experienced recurring miscarriages, and if you are going through IVF or you plan to go through IVF, and end up seeing eggs that are not making it to blast or implanting, get DNA fragmentation looked at. So once an egg is fertilized, and there's a whole DNA reprogramming that happened, but if there was a certain amount of DNA damage in the sperm, the egg cannot overcome that damage, and it will carry on to complications, whether it's just maturing the embryo or implanting or throughout pregnancy, as we've talked about. So, where do we want DNA fragmentation to be when you do get those test results? Ideally, we want DNA fragmentation as low as possible, but under 20% at the least. When it's over 20% of the sperm that has DNA fragmentation, we see natural conception takes much longer and all of the risks of miscarriage and development start increasing. So, what if you do have DNA fragmentation that is higher than that 20%? What do you do about it? First, I recommend starting with these 4 tips. Number 1, add in mixed nuts daily. So sperm love nutrients like selenium, zinc, and vitamin E. They don't only help with how that sperm is being produced and the quality of it, but those nutrients also protect the sperm from that oxidative stress and damage that leads to that DNA fragmentation as well. Number 2, increase antioxidant-rich foods. So to decrease the free radical damage that can increase the sperm DNA, we need more antioxidants. So think colorful produce. The darker, the richer the color, the higher the antioxidants by rule of thumb. So dark leafy greens, think about beets and citrus and berries. Those are all excellent things to increase your antioxidant intake. Number 3, decrease toxin exposure. So we'll dive way deeper into toxins, but in general, toxins increase oxidative damage, which can damage sperm DNA. So some toxins to think about include weed, ditch it altogether, no marijuana, no tobacco. Alcohol is also a big toxin. And if you're seeing high amounts of DNA fragmentation, I highly recommend ditching it. Swapping endocrine disrupting chemicals for more hormone friendly options. So endocrine disrupting chemicals are chemicals in like personal care products, can be in cleaning products that mimic estrogen and completely disrupt our hormone system. And they are toxins. So any of these toxins, our body has to use a lot of resources and energy to package up and eliminate, meaning it's taking energy and nutrients away from supporting how we are building and producing sperm, and also how we're protecting that sperm from that DNA damage. So not only are the toxins themselves going to increase the chance of the oxidative damage creating DNA damage, how those toxins have to take away resources from being able to protect that sperm is also going to increase the chance of DNA fragmentation happening. So it's kind of a compounding effect that toxins have when we have a high toxic burden. Stay tuned for a future episode where we'll dive a lot deeper on detox pathways and toxins in general for both men and women and how to support your fertility around those. Okay, so tip number 4 for decreasing DNA fragmentation is focusing on sleep quality. This is a really big one. Sleep quality makes a huge difference in DNA fragmentation, because sleep is our time that our body needs to rest and repair damage. And if we aren't giving our body quality time for this process, DNA damage increases. So if you're struggling with sleep, think about reducing that screen time before bed, getting natural light in the morning, getting outside and natural light anytime during the day can be helpful, but in the morning can make even bigger difference on what's happening with your circadian rhythm and how you're sleeping at night. As a quick tip for sleep quality, making sure you're getting to bed before 11 p.m., ideally asleep before 11 p.m. can make a difference too, and be consistent with it. So, starting with these tips can definitely help. I'll recap them. Number one is to add in mixed nuts daily for those sperm loving nutrients. Number two is increase antioxidant rich foods. Think about those deep, rich colors in your produce. Number three is decreasing toxin exposure. And number four is focusing on sleep quality. Supplements can also play a very supportive role, but should typically be individualized. I've seen a really big change in DNA fragmentation in as little as 3 months, because that does mirror that time frame that it takes for sperm to be produced. So don't let any providers tell you that you can't change it. Unfortunately, many like to say that you can't do anything about it, and I think it's mainly because they don't know how to support you in changing it. But I've seen DNA fragmentation decrease from 94% of sperm having damage to 64% of sperm having damage in just 3 months. And obviously, we had a long ways to go from there. And the next 4 months, we saw it under 20. So it does significantly change if you are committed to making the changes. And if you're not seeing the changes that you should be seeing, individualized support can make a world of difference in getting those parameters to shift, because there's all sorts of other underlying barriers that can be getting in the way of the process of how your sperm is being produced and how it is being protected once it is produced. Not all fertility doctors can test for DNA fragmentation just due to like access of labs. But there is an option for you to be able to order it on your own. I'm a really big fan of the company Give Legacy, and actually have a 20% discount code that I will include in the show notes for you. So you can do that all on your own without having to push for it at your clinic also. And if you are struggling to see improvements in your fertility, don't hesitate to reach out for individualized support. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.